This past year hasn't been quiet. But in the midst of chaos, moments to pray. Catholics standing up for the most vulnerable from the womb.
We are dancing on the grave of Roe versus Wade.
Millions of lives will be saved by this decision.
Beyond the border and welcoming the stranger.
My friend asked me, what school? And I said, this nice Catholic school.
This is a time for change, so next year can be the revival. Tonight on Currents News, a look back at 2022.
Christine Persichetti. 2022 has been a busy year for Catholic journalism, from the migrant crisis to synod listening sessions, and perhaps the biggest story in half a century, the end of federal abortion rights. In a 6-3 vote, the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, putting states in control of the procedure. A win for pro-life Catholics all over the country. But as we told you back in June, the fight for the unborn continues. Hugs and cheers from pro-life supporters in front of the Supreme Court Friday morning after hearing Roe v. Wade was overturned.
I've been fighting my entire adult life for this day. It is one important victory. It's not the end, but we are dancing on the grave of Roe versus Wade.
The justices voted 6-3 to uphold a Mississippi law that bans abortions after 15 weeks, and in doing so, overruled the nearly 50-year precedent. Justice Samuel Alito wrote, "The Constitution makes no reference to abortion, and no such right is implicitly protected by any constitutional provision."
This is a moment 50 years in the making. Millions and millions of innocent human beings were lost because of the Roe versus Wade decision, and I'm so glad that the justices actually established the justice and the rule of law in this land, and that so many millions of lives will be saved by this decision.
Brooklyn Bishop Robert Brennan called the decision encouraging. In a letter to the faithful, he wrote, "Today's decision corrects the crucial errors of Roe v. Wade and accompanying cases that have prevented our elected representatives from enacting even modest legal protections for the unborn." But not everyone agrees. Pro-abortion supporters also converged on the Supreme Court Friday, as they have for weeks since a draft opinion showing the justices were moving in this direction was leaked. Homeland Security says that led to an increase in violent threats from pro-abortion rights extremists. It also led to a number of attacks on pro-life centers across the country. The White House says President Joe Biden denounces any acts of violence, although he hasn't addressed it himself. He did, however, speak out Friday, calling it a sad day for the court and for the country.
Now, with Roe gone, let's be very clear. The health and life of women in this nation are now at risk.
Since that day in June, some states banned abortion outright. Others expanded and even codified the procedure. Bishop Brennan says there's still a lot of work to do, especially in New York, the so-called abortion capital of the world.
The reality is, though, we still have a long way to go in terms of the conversion of hearts and minds. I said that at the time of the decision, and I would say that even more strongly today. We put a lot of our efforts into serving, to working to provide other legislation that provides for the decision to have life. You know, things like child care provisions in the law, things like giving women the opportunity to continue their education or to continue their career.
And that's a promise not only from Bishop Brennan, but from all the bishops in New York. After the decision, they put out a pledge to expectant mothers throughout the state saying, "We will not abandon you." They are encouraging any woman, regardless of belief or situation, to come to the Catholic Church and get the services and supports she needs to carry her baby to term. In the Diocese of Brooklyn, there are a number of resources available to help keep that promise. There are currently 2 pregnancy centers, the Life Center of New York on 5th Avenue in Brooklyn and the Bridge to Life in College Point, Queens. In terms of housing options for young mothers with children, there are actually 5 options, 3 Providence houses, 1 on Church Avenue in Brooklyn, 1 on Prospect Avenue, Brooklyn, and 1 in Jamaica, Queens. There's also 2 more Brooklyn centers, the Rose Kennedy Family Center on Halsey Street and Bethany House on Sidham Street. The bishops also launched a resource page to help mothers in need. Just go to nyscatholic.org/help for moms, and you can find a pro-life center by you. There's also a statewide map that directs you to local Catholic parishes that have other ministries available. And from the United States to the Holy See, Pope Francis has long been an advocate for mothers, and that's only increased after Roe and in the midst of this pandemic. Many women fear they can't juggle parenting and a career. Back in September, Jessica Easthope spoke to one single mom who points to her faith in God, words of support from the Holy Father, and her flexible employer that make it, in her own words, all worth it.
Ileana Tavares' day starts with a drive from her home in Williamsburg to East New York. There, she unbuckles 3 car seats.
Hold on for mommy.
To take her kids, all under the age of 3, to daycare.
Come.
Good morning.
And after a few kisses goodbye, she's off to work.
Good morning.
As the administrative assistant to the Vicar General for the Diocese of Brooklyn.
Office of the Vicar General, this is Ileana speaking.
Ileana is part of the more than 70% of mothers with kids under the age of 18 in the country's workforce.
I wake up and I tell myself, you have to do this for them. And once you see their little faces in the morning, you're like, yeah, it's worth it.
Ileana's a single mom and the main provider for her kids. Her flexible workplace, knowing they're the priority, has made it possible for her to have it all. Career and family.
They expect you to get your kid and to take care of your kid first, and then everything else comes second.
During the pandemic's great resignation, 4.4 million Americans left the workforce. Among them, mothers who cited the financial burden of childcare, the gender pay gap, and lack of breastfeeding accommodation.
They don't see that women are needed and that mothers specifically are needed in their place, and they are.
For Ileana, working for the church has shed light on how much needs to change. For the last 70 years, birth rates have decreased worldwide, with a total 50% decline. Pope Francis said the alarming reality many women face is that their jobs will be in jeopardy, or they won't be able to continue working after they give birth. The Holy Father said the solution is a more supportive and tolerant work environment.
With Pope Francis, it makes me feel like someone is listening to us, to our cries as mothers. Help, we need to work.
That was Jessica Easthope reporting. Ileana says she feels empowered in both her roles and hopes she can be a role model to moms who think having it all is impossible.
Also tonight, it's no longer debatable. The U.S. is in crisis, spilling way beyond the border.
Cities should not be carrying the weight of a national problem.
Catholics picking up where government fails, welcoming the stranger.
New York City is thousands of miles away from the southern border, but every day busloads of migrants are arriving at Port Authority. Back in September, we introduced you to one family starting their new lives in Brooklyn. Salve Regina Catholic Academy opened its arms and promised their children a quality education. Jessica Easthope has the story from East New York.
Iraima Ramirez is picking out a uniform for her son Marcel. He's new to Salve Regina Catholic Academy and to this country. Unlike his classmates in 7th grade, he doesn't speak any English and lives in a shelter. He hasn't had a permanent home in 9 months. The situation in my country has made it impossible to provide food and necessities for my family or take care of their health on a salary that added up to $15 a month. Iraima's family is one of thousands from Central and South America who have landed in New York City with just the clothes on their backs. The dictatorship in Venezuela has gotten to a point of lawlessness, and so we had to abandon everything we have and risk our lives to find something better. When they arrived in Brooklyn, the family's unbreakable Catholic faith led them to church, where they met Father Ed Mason.
These folks have been literally dumped in our city. To be able to serve them and help them at this time is really a blessing.
In the last month, Father Mason has raised more than $25,000 to help Yudaima's family and 24 others, some of whom came on buses from Texas. That includes making sure Marcel's Catholic education is free of charge.
Showing them the generosity of spirit that we are called to have as Catholics. We definitely want to be able to provide that for them.
In the Diocese of Immigrants, Superintendent Deacon Kevin McCormick says this is what the mission of Catholic education looks like.
If someone is going to be a follower of Jesus, they have to protect the widow, the orphan, and the foreigner. Whoever comes to our schools, we will work and find a way to educate them.
And Yuraima says she finally feels like someone has her back. They have opened their hearts and blessed us. They're able to get an education and also have their faith fed.
That was Jessica Easthope reporting, and if you're interested in sending your children to Catholic school, you can enroll next year. Just visit CatholicSchoolsBQ.org or call 718-965-7380 for more information. A recent report estimated that supporting migrants in New York could cost the city more than $1 billion a year, and that's with families barely getting by. So one Catholic pizza man took matters into his own hands.
And young kids, and they're smiling because they're about to eat some yummy pizza.
He's putting his faith before politics and pushing it all into the oven. Night after night, the owners of Verdi's Pizza and Pasta House on Staten Island were giving away hot food to the hundreds of migrants living in nearby hotels. When we caught up with them in October, they'd only been open for about a month, but owners Sebastian Bongiovanni and his wife Danielle say their faith compelled them to get cooking.
The Catholic in me is in the core of my heart, right? And we live by certain things. Women and children cannot go hungry.
Was it meant for me to help out? You know, I don't know. You know, only God knows. But I know if I have food, I'm not going to make someone go hungry.
Some people in the neighborhood were angry at the pizza place for supporting the migrants, calling for a boycott of the business. But Sebastian says he's going to continue to feed them as long as they are hungry. There's a lot more news headed your way. Catholic schools across the country have been running out of room this year. Why? That's a good thing. Meanwhile, schools in the Diocese of Brooklyn saved a seat for children escaping war. And a Queens artist teams up with a church to better reflect the community by lining its walls with diversity. It's no secret that a Catholic education is some of the best money can buy. But this year, there are more students in seats than ever before. Enrollment is making a comeback in some of the largest dioceses around the country, and the Diocese of Brooklyn is leading the way. Back in February, Jessica Easthope showed us one school in Bell Harbor that's actually running out of room.
Space is tight on the walls in the hallways of St. Francis de Sales Catholic Academy. That's because it's been 20 years since the school had this many students.
We've made great efforts in our diocese of trying to increase enrollment and, let people see the value of Catholic education here in Brooklyn and Queens.
New data from the National Catholic Educational Association shows enrollment in Catholic schools nationwide is climbing back toward pre-pandemic levels. Enrollment this year is up almost 4%, and the Diocese of Brooklyn is near the top of the list, with elementary school enrollment growing 2.4%. St. Francis de Sales Catholic Academy had 569 students last school year. This year, there are 638.
The interesting thing is how the enrollment has grown this year.
Frantic, excellent.
Judy Lindner says her students have adapted seamlessly.
Let's go to Jack.
Watching her over and sometimes through plastic shields.
We are the church.
Her first graders don't take up too much space, but next year there'll be more of them.
And because we are growing in enrollment, now Mr. Scharbach is able to make the first grade into 3 classes.
And it's not only first grade that's had to modify.
That used to be our cafeteria.
As enrollment climbed, Principal Scharbach has had to transform the entire school.
One thing that the pandemic has had us do is to really be creative in how we, structure a school.
About 10 minutes left.
He says it's sad to see so many people forced out of Catholic schools by the economic effects of the pandemic, a problem they've tried to keep under control at the school.
We've tried to be a little bit more understanding, trying to work with them around it, and we also have a tuition assistance committee for anyone who has, fallen on tough times.
That was Jessica Easthope reporting. Some schools this year grew in different ways. One opened its doors to a student who traveled hundreds of miles on foot, a journey to escape war-torn Ukraine. Ellen Caravan and her son Theodore were among the thousands of Ukrainians fleeing for their safety in June. The mother and son walking miles with only the clothes on their backs and a single bag between them. Ellen had lived in Brooklyn for 17 years and held out hope for sanctuary in the Diocese of Brooklyn.
I made a decision that when he's gonna be back, I'm gonna enroll him here. And my friend asked me, what school? And I said, this nice Catholic school.
Yeah, I'm afraid of the war, Russia. It's dangerous. And I scared there was boom, and I was scared.
Catholic Academy welcomed the pair with open arms. Theodore excited to be living the life of a normal fifth grader far away from the terrors of war. Turning now to one of the most anticipated stories in the Catholic world. The results are in. The Holy Father now has a working document from everyday people in his own hands. The so-called Synod listening sessions were his personal request, and the new document details Catholics' hopes and needs for the future of the Church. It's a big one, and that's all thanks to a special group that sifted through hundreds of reports from all over the world. In Brooklyn, the process started last year, which means we are officially at the halfway mark. So now we need a checkup, a synod scan, so to speak. Just how are we doing in this marathon? Back in October, Jessica Easthope told us we are on pace, but the Church here will never be the same.
The important themes and topics of the Synod.
While the average parishioner might think the Synod process is over for the Diocese of Brooklyn, Sister Marianne LaPiccolo says now is when the real progress begins.
This is the beginning of a long, long process of rebuilding the Church and getting people back.
Thousands across Brooklyn and Queens participated, nearly 1,000 digitally. A report on the listening sessions was due over the summer, and now the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops is reviewing how Catholics feel about their church.
And that's the key. Can we create inviting, welcoming communities of faith so that people want to be part of us?
In Brooklyn and Queens, people want more faith formation for young people and families. They also want a focus on the area's diverse populations. The Diocese of Brooklyn is the most diverse diocese in the country. Masses are said in 33 languages.
The challenge is, how do we make this one parish community? And then how do we build community within the parish so that people know one another?
Bishop Brennan said what struck him most about the Synod process is how passionate people are about their faith and church community.
And we don't live in Catholic bubbles. What people are looking for is to make that connection. They want their faith to be able to sustain them and help them in the living out of their daily life.
Over the next year, the Brooklyn Diocesan Report will become part of larger national and then continental reports. And just like the Church itself, the goal for the Synod is ever evolving.
What he wants this to be is an ongoing process of discernment, the journeying together as church. And that happens in every age, with every age group, in every culture, in every corner of our world.
In Prospect Heights, Jessica Easthope, Currents News.
Something else that's ongoing in the Diocese of Brooklyn and beyond, the National Eucharistic Revival. The 3-year initiative was launched by the U.S. bishops on Corpus Christi Sunday back in June. The goal of the campaign is to reinforce that core dogma of the Catholic faith, that Jesus Christ is present in the Eucharist. It came about after a study found a majority of Catholics believe the bread and wine at Mass are just symbols. We'll have plenty of reporting on that next year. But back to 2022, a major highlight for the Diocese of Brooklyn, a special Mass last February celebrated by the nation's first Black Cardinal. Cardinal Wilton Gregory from the Archdiocese of Washington, D.C. celebrated the Mass of Thanksgiving for Black History Month at Immaculate Conception Monastery Church in Jamaica Estates. During his homily, he delivered a message of hope and empowerment. Speaking of hope, beautiful portraits of progress unveiled. The contributions of people of color were celebrated at the Church of St. Francis Xavier in Manhattan with the help of Queens artist Patricia Brintle. In June, the church blessed and displayed portraits she painted of 12 saints and religious leaders who were Black, Indigenous, and people of color. The saints included St. Lorenzo Ruiz, a Filipino priest, and St. Josephine Bakita from Sudan. And in August, a celebration 2 centuries in the making, we commemorated the 200th anniversary of the Cathedral Basilica of St. James, the first church built on Long Island. The cathedral's storied history ties together the dioceses of Brooklyn, Rockville Centre, and the Archdiocese of New York. Bishop Brennan presided over a special mass, and the faithful filled the pews and celebrated the Eucharist as they've done there for centuries. And still to come on Currents News, wrapping up the year with a gift. Why this couple from New Jersey wants to make sure kids in the Diocese of Brooklyn have a bright Christmas. It's one of the biggest tablet campaigns of the year, and it's happening right now. Want to end 2022 on a good note? How about giving back? The Tablets Bright Christmas campaign has been helping families in need for decades. And right there to take up the cause every time are 2 longtime donors, Joan and Lou Gansilla. They continue to give even though they don't live in Brooklyn anymore. Jessica Easthope has their story from Farmingdale, New Jersey.
The Grinch ended up coming out every Christmas.
The first thing you see when you walk into Lou and Joan Gansilla's house are toys.
And then sat next to him in the presider's chair throughout Mass.
They belong to their son Joseph, or as he was known in the Diocese of Brooklyn, Father Joe.
His love for the children. And
they would start asking him
in September.
Who's
going to come?
Who's coming
right.
for Christmas?
And he would never tell.
I'm not telling.
Father Joe used these toys every Christmas as a way to relate to the children at his masses, right up until Christmas of 2019, 10 days before he died.
I could not believe it.
Sometimes we still can't believe it. You know, we just expect him to walk through the door. You know, it's just, you don't expect that. You're not supposed to be burying a child.
And she gave it to us.
Like Father Joe, his parents know how impactful toys can be in a child's life, which is why they've been donating to the Tablets Bright Christmas campaign for more than 25 years.
When we get the mailing every year, it's, yes, absolutely.
Joan and Lou have since moved away from the Diocese of Brooklyn.
And here's Regina.
And their home parish, the Basilica of Regina Pacis.
We've attended there all our lives.
We saw the church being built.
But for them, it will always be home.
Anytime we go back to visit our son, when we walk into the church, we have that feeling. We're home.
We're home.
Our roots were there, you know.
And they, in a way, they still are.
And giving to Bright Christmas is a chance to make that home a better place for those who really need it. Losing a child changed the Gansillas forever.
Just a few days before he passed away. This is New Year's Eve. He died on January the 6th.
But their faith and connection to the Diocese of Brooklyn has sustained them.
We get the tablet and we see all the letters. Thank you so much for what Bright Christmas gave to us. So that makes us feel good.
And with a new year and a higher goal, the Gansillas are giving a little more. Jessica Easthope, Currents News.
And it's not too late to get into the giving spirit. The tablet needs your help to reach their goal. The staff at the paper is hoping to top last year's record of $117,000 and raise $125,000. Here's how you can get involved. Make a checkout to the Bright Christmas Fund and mail it to Bright Christmas LB number 2118, P.O. Box 95,000. That's in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and the zip code 19195. Or you can make your donation online at thetablet.org/brightchristmas. And that wraps up 2022. I'm Christine Persichetti. Thank you for joining us as always, because we are putting your faith in the news. On behalf of all of us at Currents News, have a very Merry Christmas and blessed 2023. Hope to see you again next year.